I visit Venice at least once every 2 years. To me, the city is a totem of art, a totem of the past and the future. The idea that it is a floating city, floating like a dream. I began as a carver from 1973. When I carve, I am always trying to capture an image in the air, a goddess, a face, peaceful and calm, elongate ears. The eyes are closed, but not completely, because when one is asleep, one is still awake. When one is not looking, one is still seeing. I was a monk for 6 months. When I was a monk, I learned that the universe and everything in nature has a soul. Everything is alive. Everything we see, touch, and feel must come from our projections of the self. A totem reflects our belief. To walk around it is a ritual to elevate our existence, like we walk around the city. The process of carving is a process of deconstruction. The process of sculpting is a process of construction and reconstruction. I carve and sculpt, and carve and sculpt, and carve and sculpt. Art to me is about practice of the self until the self disappears. It is almost religious. It is always spiritual.
My name is Francesco D'Amosto, a Venetian architect, author and historian. My family has lived here in Venice for 1,000 years, one of the earliest families that set foot in Venice. Next to me is curator James Putnam. After a year, we are now back in Venice for a new exhibition, Wallace Chan, TOTEM. James, could you share with us the idea behind this exhibition? Why TOTEM? What does it mean?
Well, totem really means it's a sort of ancestral spirit. And one of the main things behind this exhibition is well, perhaps the biggest society problem is that people think that, you know, we're separate from nature, we're apart from nature rather than part of nature. And I think when you look at that statue, the sort of enigmatic face that Mr. Chan used characteristically in his work, it's very much a sort of symbol of the earth. And, you know, we're obviously at a state where, you know, man is encroaching on the delicate balance of the earth. And this exhibition is really all about that fine balance between, you know, nature and humans on earth.
So is it like a connection between humans and nature?
Yes.
That in a certain way they have to calibrate or reconstruct in a certain way?
Yes, I mean, I think the fact that we have the sculpture unassembled is very much part of the idea that, you know, we're sort of broken down the delicate balance of the earth. And, you know, this is the fundamental part of, you know, totem worship and that kind of thing. It's expressing this human connection with nature.
Yeah, and speaking about the faces, that is something that intrigued me every time. I think Wallace is like draw on the East and the West, the past and the future, and his faces seems like both to be timeless and at a certain time transcendental.
Well, it's a characteristic of his work. You see that face all the time in his work. And like you say, it's a kind of merger, you know, between the kind of, you know, his Buddhist background and, you know, looking at the typical kind of enigmatic Buddhist face, but also the, you know, the sculptures that he saw in Christian cemeteries in China when he was growing up. And it's a sort of combination of these two, you know, iconographic elements.
And I love the piece in your essay when you wrote that there are long ears and long eyes, just in the sense that this, with these faces of ancient knowledge, could understand more than us, something like that. This can be a relation like this, or
I think it is. It's a sort of, you know, it's a sensitivity of you know, these elements of, you know, listening and seeing that he's trying to explore with his work, you know. Yeah.
So I think he has this idea that is quite interesting of the self and non-self. How does it influence his art? How do you think? You mentioned in your curator essay that the exhibition is like a paradox. It connects the ideas of both formation and fragmentation.
Yeah, this is a kind of duality that you see with all his work, you know, the yin and yang, the big and the small, and all these elements. And I think it's very much to do with the kind of Buddhist belief in oneness, you know, and so, you know, that figure doesn't represent, you know, any particular person. It represents, you know, everything and everything on the earth. And
so we have in a situation, we have like the order and the chaos, the unity and the randomness.
Yes.
And the duality and opposites all together in a situation.
Yes, I mean, I think also this point of, you know, the connection with the earth and Gaia, or whatever you want to call it, is very much, you'll notice that we have this sound installation which, you know, was introduced into the work, and it's very important because that frequency you hear there is the frequency of the earth. You can measure the frequency of the earth, and people now do it, and I think it's about 136 hertz, and it's based on the you know, like the way the earth will move around the sun, it orbit the sun, and so within a year the number of revolutions it orbits the sun can be you know, found, the sound, the actual frequency. And Mr. Chan's work is all about this energy, you know, this frequency that materials have, and inanimate materials even have, like the metals that he works with.
Yes, because I read also, I think it's the idea of Wallace, that every material has a different frequency, has like a life in a certain way.
Yes, that's also part of a totemistic belief, you know, that there's all this energy that's invisible, that you can't actually see, but it exists.
Like the wave of sound that you were speaking
Yes.
of before, or the wave that arises from the universe.
Yes, it's very kind of metaphysical. There's no way of, you know, scientifically, you know, proving it, a bit like homeopathy or something like that. But I mean, if you believe and really understand that, it makes a big difference. And it's very much sort of emblematic of the whole idea of, you know, our connection with nature, something that we've lost. You know?
I read in your thing that Wallace was saying that when he starts to be in meditation, he can manage to feel this energy coming out of the material, to feel it really
Yes.
in himself.
I think Javier's captured that very well in the video work that he's made. You know, it's all those sort of pixelations that you can't actually see, but they're present. I think Mr. Chan was saying, you know, when he goes into deep meditation, which you can only achieve that state if you've, you know, trained as a monk,
of not being, like
Yes.
not existing.
But you can, things tend to pixelate. You know, you can see things in terms of lots of little dots, and you can actually visualize the energy that's coming out of it.
Yes, it's quite interesting, the thing. And I think in a certain way about this exhibition, Wallace is quite radical, that instead of exhibiting a complete sculpture, he's showing unassembled parts. Like you said in your essay, he has opened up the space of the sculpture, framing gaps between structural elements. Now, are we not part of the sculpture too?
Yes, we become part of the sculpture. You know, as the audience has to.
So when it's open up, we are part of it. We are inside it.
Exactly. I mean, when, as you know, he's had to quarantine a lot this year, and so he hasn't really had time to make any new work. This big sculpture, which is, you know, this 10-meter high sculpture, which was the last new work that he made, was shown first of all only once before in Shanghai, and there was a plan, or maybe we should show it in Venice, and then he came up with the idea I want to show it, you know, in fragmentary state as a sort of symbol, as a metaphor of our uncertainty in the world at the moment. And to me, it's, for someone that's worked a lot with ancient sculpture, and it reminds me of the 19th century, you know, romantic poet Shelley, that talks about Ozymandias and sees like that fragmented sculpture as a symbol of a lost civilization.
It's like we have, it's like having lost a knowledge, something that is, in a sad way, we see some ruins of a civilization that is lost in a certain way. And with it also the knowledge of it. It's something quite, in Shelley I feel a sensation of sadness in this.
Yeah, there is an element of sadness of some end of a golden age, perhaps, you know, but I don't think he wants to express something in a sad way. It's mainly a sense of...
Like a knowledge that we are part of,
yes.
Something like that.
Yes, I mean, obviously, probably this Biennale and generally a lot of artists now are expressing the idea of, you know, the environment and man's effect on the environment and the Anthropocene, as they call it in geological time. But I think what we've got here is rather than statistics, you know, from, you know, scientists, environmentalists and politicians, we have an artist responding in a sensual way. So the message is coming across about, you know, man's effect on the environment and how we need to repair and we need to make that balance. But he's doing it in a very subtle, sensual sort of way. So we can experience it and think about it and contemplate it as we're walking around the sculpture.
We have to regain that equilibrium that we can gain inside the sculpture, because it's something that is all around us.
Yes, like very much so, yeah.
And he wrote that Wallace's approach to sculpture form is driven by instinct and introspective thought patterns. Could you elaborate? Could you explain?
I think he's a very instinctive artist, and he doesn't have a preconceived, you know, concept about what he does. It's very honest and direct. You know, he's, you know, just makes his work, and I don't think he's afraid of it being, you know, beautiful. Whereas beauty in contemporary art terms is not a very fashionable word, but it does have a beauty, and it does have a sort of mystery to it, and it's a sort of, like we say, introspection. It's like, it's very contemplative, you know, in the way that you know, meditation or thinking about religion. It's spiritual work, but not in a sort of cheesy way. It's spiritual in a, you know, in a very profound, serious way that, you know, you look at those faces and you really, you know, can feel your way into it and perhaps have some access to his emotive thought about the work.
Yes, because I think that Wallace said that he lives to create and he creates to live. And in all this period, as you said, in the quarantine, he has the chance to work a lot on that. And he's always saying that he lives for this art. From the time that he was in the monastery when he was 16 years old. But let me hear from you, what was this evolution in his mind that make him find in the art his way of living?
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that thinks a lot about, perhaps about nature, but also about the mysteries of the world and the, you know, the almost sort of alchemical properties of the materials he uses. So I think it's a very strong belief in expressing it in the materials that he works with, and constantly experimenting, you know, because he's, as you probably know, that titanium hasn't really been used at this scale. I mean, he used it before for smaller jewellery pieces, but, you know, to create, you know, colossal dynamic sculpture of that took maybe about 7 or 8 years experimentation in order to work it out. So he's constantly kind of searching and researching, experimenting, taking big risks. You know, we didn't know how the sculpture was going to look in pieces, fragmentary, but as you can see, it you know, it really works. It works in the scale of dimensional
Yeah, for him
space.
It was a great passage because he said also that to work in bigger things, he has more freedom of work, of freedom of expressing himself. he was speaking about an elephant, I remember, and he loved the distortions. That in a certain way, I think, of what I understood, that for him, when he was representing something, if he managed to create the distortion, he felt alive in a certain way. Is it something that I understood? Do you think is right?
Yeah, I mean, he's interested in how materials can change, and he sees, you know, life itself as an element of distortion. You know, all the things that go on, and it is a fundamental part of our history. You know, as you know, the Baroque and things.
Yeah.
Distortion was a big part of it. You know, how these materials change in an expressive way.
Is something that is really something new in a certain way that we find in art. And I would like it is really such a pleasure that you and Wallace came back. And thank you for staging Wallace Chan TOTEM in Venice. Thank you so much, James. And really, I think it's something that is really touching. Thank you so much.